a good lunch. I know it's a time for a good siesta, but we'll ensure that we keep this session very interactive. And we'll try to bring in any opinions from the audience as well in between. So it's going to be more of a casual talks, and let's not make it a specific speech kind of panel. So today we are going to discuss on the. Thank you, Bhavji. So the panel discussion today is in the intersection of educational resources, technological innovation, and free knowledge. Education has evolved a lot, especially how the education was pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and post-pandemic. And these education basically, is a basic human right and are crucial factors in developing an individual as well as society. In today's panel, we'll discuss how it has evolved and what are the various ways and mechanisms which we can adapt to ensure that there's a free flow of information. And with that, I just wanted to open up today's panel. I would request panel members to, speakers to introduce themselves and also basically answer to this question on why do we need education resources and should they be free and how basically technology can help achieve this free knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Praveen. I'm Praveen Garimella. So I work as the head of digital learning at the Indian School of Business. So I have been, working in this area of education technology and learning science for quite some time. So I'll quickly kind of give you what my view is on the education resources and accessibility and learning in particular, and then pass it on. So one of the things that in the learning science research, in terms of how people learn, that we have found is that it all depends on what the learner does and thinks, right? It all happens in the mind. So there's a lot of knowledge out there, but that knowledge is not really illuminated unless the learner actually starts processing it, right? So I come more from this theory of how people process knowledge. How do we all process information? And then there's this entire stages of development, if you will, where we say that people go from being not aware of something to becoming an expert at it. So I've been studying all of these and I'll try to bring in all of that into the conversation. And in terms of education resources, we are all today blessed with technology where we all learn just in time. If I don't know something, the first go-to place is search on Google. You get a little bit of information there and you get excited. Go to Wikipedia page, learn about that, and then find a MOOC and then learn a little more and then kind of go on. So I think we have seen all of that. Today we all have access to that. And then we are also seeing that these tools are becoming a lot more interesting with the advances in AI, right? So there's this chat GPT, I'm sure all of you have tried and experienced, if not you should. It's fun on how you interact with knowledge now, because it doesn't always give you the right answers, but it's a good starting point. And we can also talk about a lot of, what prerequisite knowledge you need to have in order to use all these advances. So with that, I'll pass it on.
Thanks. My name is Santhosh. I work at the Wikimedia Foundation, specifically at the language team. I'm a principal engineer at the language team. My team work on various technology projects related to the language and the language related aspects. So I think all of you know that the vision of Wikipedia is to provide the sum of all knowledge to everybody, right? And in all languages. So maybe I'm preaching to the choir, like I think everybody sitting here is completely aware of what is free knowledge and what's the importance, and I don't think anybody disagree that knowledge should not be free. Like if there is anybody, we can have a very interesting conversation. I would like to hear. So going back to the free knowledge, you might be knowing, but just to remind the definition, what is free knowledge? So it had its beginnings somewhat in the parallel with the free software movement, but free software movement defined free software as something that everybody can write, everybody can share, reuse, redistribute, that kind of freedoms, four kind of freedoms. So the definition of free knowledge also somewhat related. It talks about access to knowledge and the rights to share, redistribute, not restricted by any economical or any kind of technical barriers. So those things are very important when we are talking about access to knowledge in all kinds of language and making that available for everybody. So what Wikipedia did in this whole movement about free knowledge is like, first of all, we need to acknowledge that Wikipedia is not the full source of all the information in the world, or it's just, it provided two things. First of all, it provided a model where community can come together and create this knowledge and provide an easy way to access it in various languages. So that I think that's one of the big contribution. The second contribution is the result of the first one. Like it created a big knowledge repository. So these two models acts as like a North Star about the like a free knowledge movement. But at the same time, we really need to acknowledge that there are a lot of knowledge outside Wikipedia that is not in Wikipedia, and that also in various formats that was not predominant when Wikipedia started 22 years ago. Like Wikipedia is just a textual. We had several conversations about multiple ways knowledge is represented these days. So I think the question about whether knowledge should be free, I think I need not explain, because we had in the previous conversation people were clearly explaining the requirements, like every civilization, one generation after another generation grows on top of the knowledge accumulated, and because the knowledge is freely transferred across the generation, we prosper. And if we are not sharing, we are slowing the progress, we are forgetting things, and we are not going fast. Secondly, in the age of knowledge and internet, access to knowledge became kind of a classifier, like where you are in the society. So I will not go to the details, but just wanted to qualify these basic terms about the free knowledge. And my role in Wikimedia Foundation is to develop technology. So I'm mostly interested in the technology that facilitates this dissemination of the free knowledge to all languages. So I'll pass to.
Thank you, Santhosh. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sameera Wijerathna from Sri Lanka. I represent Danuga Axiata PLC, the largest telecommunication company in Sri Lanka. So my take on what you said, Praveen. Think of knowledge part, knowledge creation and knowledge dissemination. So both has a cost involved in it. But what you mentioned about the pandemic situation, but think of the technology, what the role technology played in that. Maybe I think how you experience the pandemic. We saw what's going on in India. I think you saw what's going on in Sri Lanka. Okay, so we sort of had the very same experiences with that. So I don't want to explain, but in both countries, I believe you will agree with me. The education, did we keep the full stop to the education during that time? Okay. No, how we kept that going, thanks to the kind of digital content, online content, maybe sources like, Wikipedia and all those, which kept that going. The technology can do a lot in it. Whether it's, maybe let's get to the argument of, whether it's free, whether it's paid, maybe all those. But what we experience there, the free as well as paid, technology-driven education in terms of the dissemination of the knowledge played a key role there. Okay, so if we look at what else we can do, I think maybe it taught us good lessons. Maybe pandemic, let's see the bright side of it. That showed us good lessons. What else we can do and what else we can continue. Maybe now we are in the post-pandemic. I don't see except one or two wearing masks. Actually, I brought my mask. My mask was there, and I think free mask was given to everyone, right? but I don't think that many vary, only except one or two, because like that era is gone. But there was very good lessons from that pandemic situation, especially on education, especially on digital content, especially on digital education knowledge delivery. Okay, so I think continuation of that, building on that is what we need to focus on. Probably in the next rounds, we can discuss those.
Thank you. Hi everyone, this is Bhuvana Meenakshi. I run a self-help cooperative called the Women in Tech Collectives India, and also co-founder of the Emergibility, which includes people from the neurodiverse backgrounds to be involved in tech and we craft out various teaching and mentoring elements that could also include neurodiverse communities, like making them more into diverse and inclusive groups. As part of reaching technology as an education or a curriculum, so while we took education to women from marginalized backgrounds, there's always been challenges of social stigma, or could be like even creating a smaller digital infrastructure for them to do a basic open source contribution, or let it be in terms of reaching any proper particular goal out of it, or even getting trained in a specific skill set, right? So over the pandemic, that's where we initiated the whole concept of this women in tech collectives, and it's more of like trying to make things like possible that you're not being restricted to a physical environment to get dependency, or like to get that source of education from let's say a very formal type, or like a place where you have time bound restrictions, or like a place that you're not feeling safe. So that's exactly what we wanted to address, and that's where we wanted universities, institutions, and other formal types of educational forums to adapt open source as part of their curriculum and take this forward, and how mentors and trainers could also be mapped with these essential parts of learning ecosystems and make them more inclusive is what I've been working on for a while, and looking forward to discuss more about this as well. Thank you.
That's really nice. We have academia, we have tech, and community. I think you all are going to enjoy the conversation today. We are talking about free knowledge. I wanted to know from Praveen, you and Sameera, when does this knowledge become free? We're talking about free knowledge. When it becomes free, is there someone who decides it needs to be free? Is it only at the behest of the organizations and institutions to make it free?
All right. So I think when I think about knowledge, right? So there are two things. One is there is knowledge which is written in the books and various resources that we have. Some of those books, you'll have to go buy them. You may not have access in some cases. They're probably very old. There are all kinds of things that go on. But I think to me what happens is, let's say when I go through an educational experience, or I do my own research, or maybe in terms of work, I end up assimilating a lot of this knowledge, and I also have conversations. I collaborate with people, and then there are discussions. There's talk around knowledge. So I see every little bit of what I said is knowledge, right? It is captured and coded in a certain way. Now, again, I'll take the human learning-centered aspect of it, right? So all of that knowledge is out there in the world, and there's some knowledge in your head. Now, how do you assimilate it? A lot is known, but there's a lot more to be known in terms of how humans really process information and assimilate. There are ways in which we encode knowledge, in our mind, and that's very different from how you do it and how it is written somewhere else.
So when you say encoding, is it processing information in your head?
Yeah, it is a way of processing what information is out there, and then you assimilate, you infer something from it. and that is kind of limited by your perception, right? And then you encode that little bit in your head and you start applying it. Now that's how we do that. Now when we say sum of all the knowledge, now what is that? What are various things we should add up, right? I think it's not just the repositories which are out there, it's also what we have encoded as a human race, right? And all of that is knowledge. And how do we get access to it? I think there are several pathways. And that's how I see how knowledge is represented. And I think it takes several forms. There are very few forms that we probably perceive, right? And I think we are all limited by that perception.
I just want to talk about the free in this one. So the one definition of free is always about like it should be easy to share, everybody can distribute. But coming with the actual meaning, the other meaning of free, like the cost. So if you talk about an abstract concept called knowledge and talk about the cost of knowledge, I think as an abstract concept, the cost of the knowledge is often associated with its curation, its storage, its dissemination. And when we say a free-flowing knowledge in the society so that everybody can access without their financial or technical background, this means it comes with a zero cost as in the price. Mostly it means the society finds a mechanism where these kinds of cost to produce knowledge, store and distribute, they find a mechanism where the cost is not high, and they find a mechanism where this can be collectively distributed among all the beneficiaries. So these two aspects are important, the two meanings of free. Because of English, free has two meanings. Other languages has two words for that one. But there are several models across the world, not limited to Wikipedia, where this cost of production, curation, dissemination, and all of these costs are subsidized or made free using various models. And Wikipedia is just one model.
Yeah, I have a kind of different opinion. In the morning we heard knowledge is political. Hassan, I think I remember saying. So think of knowledge. Knowledge always has a value to that. Value, it has a cost to that. Maybe that knowledge, the creation, knowledge dissemination. Maybe if you look at the Sri Lankan example, I don't know, maybe India, to some extent, I guess you have the free education, but Sri Lanka, believe me, it's free education. From your primary, secondary, tertiary, they come to a university like this, they don't spend a single cent. Okay, so why? Okay, why? So as a country, we see that as an investment. Why we disseminate knowledge free? It's not actually free. Someone somewhere pays for it. Okay, as a citizens, we pay taxes. Get our next generation educated. So it is not free. Their delivery, for them, their recipient as recipient, they get it free. But someone somewhere has paid the bill. Okay, but maybe your education system. Why Google is managed by Sundar Pichai. It's the kind of the knowledge system you had here. We generated resources, the skill set. We go and manage the global big entities like that. So that when we look at it, knowledge, multiple, maybe even the gain knowledge. I was talking to some kids here, during my lunch and all. Some come all the way from somewhere else to Hyderabad, all the way here to study at IIIT. So just think of maybe they pay something here for their studies, but there will be a cost involved around it. That is we call transaction cost. Okay, maybe think if someone from Delhi, coming here, or maybe Chennai coming here, so they need to stay somewhere, they need to find their own foods, and the transaction cost involved in it. So knowledge, it's most of the time, it's outside visible or not, it has a cost involved in it. Maybe I'll give you a simple, very quick example from Sri Lanka. What we did was, Sri Lanka, similar setup like yours. They are like maybe rural schools. We have 10,000 schools there, 10,154 schools. So no science teachers, no maths teachers, things like that. So maybe they Ministry of Education approach us and ask, can you help us on this? But can we produce science teachers? No. Can we build more schools, more buildings, give science lab? No. So what we said was, we can't do any of those. But we will give you alternative solution to make that education more affordable and create this free content. So what we did was, even in rural Sri Lanka, now I think the situation is much improved, but we don't have 4G, 3G in there. So, but we have the satellite, I think we use the Indosat. So we use a satellite, we have the satellite television business as well. So what we did was, we got ministry to develop the best teachers to develop this content. Actually, we brought some of them to Indira Gandhi Open University GNU here as well to train them. So develop this content, put it through satellite, which cover the whole Sri Lanka. Okay, so that is free. That is given free. That is facilitated by us, a public-private partnership. But that we look at, maybe as a government, as Sri Lanka, we look at it as an investment. Not actually, maybe it's paid by someone else.
I think that's a wonderful point. Now coming back to you, Santhosh, you mentioned about two different, kind of free knowledge system in general, and I want to understand how these free knowledge are beneficial for the communities. And probably I would like to, reach out to Bhuvana also here, since you work with diverse group, how these content are basically consumed by them and the society in general and the communities who work around it, either in building those or in consuming those. So.
Yeah, I think answering that may be easy if we use some examples. So, for example, access to knowledge, how it can be beneficial. It has different manifestations. Maybe one example I can give is like. Again, based on Wikipedia. So, Wikipedia had this essential vaccines that everybody should have. We have a list of articles related to essential vaccines. And I need not explain the importance of vaccines, right? But it's important only to a person, only if that person knows about it, right? And in their own language. And we have so many languages, and English is just a small language spoken only by a small percentage of the people in the world. So we had a project, actually community had a project, but we helped using technology to translate the articles about the essential vaccines to so many languages so that people can read about it in their own language, understand the benefits about this one, and remove the confusions about all those things and get benefit from that one. So that means it's just an example like how access to knowledge in their own mother tongue that they can understand and that knowledge they have access for free helps the general benefit of, in this case, health of the society.
But here, I just wanted to bring in one more point. Whenever it comes to free knowledge, our understanding is probably the knowledge is not at the par. The material is not at par with the paid one. How do you, differentiate this, or how would you, build a narrative which says that free knowledge is at par with the knowledge which is basically given in the institution? And probably I'll bring in here, your opinion as well on this. So.
Yeah. So another nature of the knowledge is it's not static. It's always changing. It's improving. It's improved by science and research all the time. And because of this one, knowledge is standalone. It needs its own support from its own, how do you know that something is true, something is not right, something is something that you can believe. So this is where we need some models. Like there is a general tendency, like in the older generation who are not into internet, like if anything is written, like in printed, there is a tendency that people to believe it's true, right? So that tendency is there. But in the internet, when it comes, everything is on the screens and everything is rendered. And then we have developed some models where people can check and make sure that the content can be corrected. So that means it's not static. It can be corrected. Sometimes it can be wrong. So, but there is a mechanism by which people can correct. And there is a mechanism by which, instead of you saying that this is the correct information, this is the quality information, or this is the best information about something, what you provide is that some set of tools and models where a reader can use those things to assess whether it is correct or not. So that's where I think free knowledge did some innovation where instead of we had encyclopedia and we had books before, right? But one step up from this model is like we also, along with the text, along with the knowledge, we also provide models and tools where people can verify, measure the quality of these things, and make sense of that by themselves. I think that's one. That is one way where people assess the knowledge. The quality of the free knowledge compared to all other knowledge that you can access. So it's like building a model of trust, building a model of quality and reliability based on this model of interaction by the community members.
Can I take it first, Praveen? And then,
So I think we've talked about this issue of you have knowledge and providing knowledge free of cost. There's a purpose associated with that, and someone would justify. Now, when you're making all of this available for free, there's still a cost to maintain it. Right? Someone has to pay for it. I think we talked about that. Now today, that was a few decades back where we are struggling to get any knowledge onto an accessible format. Today we are having this overload of information around us. We are dealing with things like everyone has a smartphone. They can start tweeting or posting information out there. And not just that, people are able to find it very fast, right? Even without you asking for it, right? And so there are ways in which all of this information is coming in. And all of this creates an opportunity for people to process that and then make sense of it. So, the real question to me is that how do we, control for this? How do we make sure that you have all of this knowledge, information that's available? How do we kind of train people to not fall for any fake news and fake information? Accuracy is at stake, and be able to kind of validate it for yourself. Right?
it's like building a solution.
Yeah, so I think to me the most important solution is in the schools. Somehow we are always teacher-led, instructor-led. If we can go from there to empowering people to learn, right? How do you learn? And provide those critical thinking skills, saying if someone presents some piece of knowledge, can I critically think about that and say that I don't believe this is true, versus I start validating. I build some skills to go do my own research to see if that is accurate. Now here we definitely have some roadblocks, right? Maybe the most basic information is all out there, but as you go with the granularity, right, you go more precise, try to get more precise information. That's where you need, sometimes when you're doing research, you need access to journal articles, some journal article which is out there, and you probably need a subscription. Or you talk to people who have worked on it. Today it's easy to send out an email to the author and say that, hey, I looked at the abstract of your paper, I want to talk more about it. There are occasions where people respond back, given how much time you have. I think all of these are ways to still get access to knowledge. I don't think it stops because something, you can't pay for something and you can't get access to it. If you see MIT probably started the open education resources, their open courseware. The initial days of MIT open courseware, although they assume a lot of students around the world will go access the resources, it turned out that the initial days of OCW was more faculty going and accessing, and then making use of those as examples. In fact, I wouldn't mind getting inspired from some example or some assignment or a project which is used in courses, and then use it in my class, right? That's a perfectly acceptable model because it stimulates learning, and it's a very good example. So today if you kind of go forward, I mean, OER again has become huge. A lot of repositories for open education resources. People are posting their courses, their whatever artifacts they create for education. So I think the more, and it continues. There's already a framework for people to kind of continue posting about this.
So you talked about, you spoke about OER, we'll get to that. We have our one more speaker who was not able to attend us in person, but have sent a voice note which is related to OER. We'll touch base on that, but Bhuvana, before that, your views on, in general of what do you think, if the existing knowledge is inferior to the closed system of knowledge. Also, why, along with it, I wanted to understand how the neurodiverse group, basically perceive these kind of knowledge, or in terms of building knowledge, when it comes to development of knowledge, how these knowledge systems need to be built, which basically ensures that it is like everybody is able to understand that. Like Praveen did mention about, instead of everyone, just faculties refer to the certain set of knowledge which was created. So I'm sure there was some certain kind of blockers. Was it only created for certain set of audiences? Can it be more, mellowed it down?
Right. So in general, so while we talk about the FOSS communities or like the free and open knowledge system, there are three key factors which I think is normally to be considered when it is mainly around reachability, accessibility, and affordability. So where in the different instances of like starting with like how we've been doing with the WITC, where creating like smaller computers, like creating using Raspberry Pi and making them, giving them affordable computers to get things started at least, or like to get the access. Like say if there is an open source library with the MIT or like with the IIT Kharagpur library or any of those may matter. The first phase of like getting access to it, and also to know, basically get that knowledge of what I need to explore and how I need to explore is like the fundamental sort of awareness that's more required when it comes to in terms of like reachability of this open knowledge ecosystem itself. And also while you say about the you asked about the neurodiverse, how do we reach to them? So of course there are a lot of barriers again there in terms of like making various like in terms of like sorry, I forgot your name. Santhosh rightly said about the localized languages where we need to. That's one of the things. The other way is like we're trying experiments around like how to give people with braille keyboards and track ball mouse to help them in easily type or like involve. So where we have found this as a bit of more optimal way to enrich this context to the neurodiverse is like by involving them into the content generation itself, and look upon what challenges they face, and in turn how this works for them, and helping them be part of different user research works that's more done for like assistive technologies for them. So when I also like recently met with a few of the founders of two companies from who just incubated from the IITM, who do assistive prosthetics and tracking eye softwares for different assistive methods. So I mean, the place where I also find this as a challenge is the affordability, where I completely understand about like what goes in. I'm not talking that paid sort of like content or like hardware support or anything of that is not of the quality, or in terms of like they are not in par with the open source, but then making them more access to these people, or like at least trying to make them with the inclusive models of like, by involving these people is something that is still, I find it as a gap in these type of content or like technologies that is being meant to address the specific sort of marginalized and neurodiverse communities.
So now I would like to go to our speaker, Nichole Saad, who is a senior manager at education team at Wikimedia Foundation. We'll hear the voice note on this open access in promoting equitable access to knowledge. So the role of open access in providing equitable access to, promoting equitable access to knowledge to everyone. How do we see it?
Right.
Quickly, we'll wrap it up in 2 minutes and then we'll take any questions.
Okay, fine. Just that furthering down with, in line with education policies that has been also reached out to, various, audience throughout the country, and in terms of understanding these, I quickly take a reference from the new education policy as well. So this particular policy, when I explored, has, when I try to search about what's open and open source and knowledge has to do with the new education policy and how it could widely reach to various audience. So this is the mention about the NIOS and the ODL modules, like the National Institute of Open Learning and the Open Distance Learning, which has been there for quite a long time, even before this pandemic has happened. And but again, if that we go further down to understand where or the resources these materials include, or like being or actually the content that is being utilized for in order to reach to various people, is again where there is this lack of understanding or lack of inclusion of open like OER, or like even there is barely reference to Wikimedia projects or Wikimedia. There's so many wide open research works and stuff that's happening, but then the references to these are like making these accessible as part of these widely accessed education policies could be a sort of like a consideration, or like could avail opportunities for people to access as an open knowledge, is what from my perspective.
Thank you, Bhuvana. We'll quickly take 2 questions. If there are any.
That you need to pay for the maintenance or the production or the human labor that goes into it, and ultimately, these business models, like while we in turn these products target open source communities, again in order for them to contribute or develop as a whole. So that's how the whole flow follows, and also to maintain the regulations, as in like for what intention that particular product is being spanned to a business, is also sort of the main thing that goes into this while you make it for monetary purposes.
Thank you. So, the rise of digital resources